Imagine standing beneath a vast, starlit sky, believing, like generations before you, that Earth is the unchanging center of the universe. The sun, the moon, the stars, all revolving around us, ordained by divine order. Now picture a man, armed with nothing more than a telescope and an unshakable belief in reason, daring to challenge this ancient truth. That man was Galileo Galilei. In an age where questioning authority meant exile, imprisonment, or worse, Galileo looked up at the heavens and saw a new reality. Mountains on the moon, moons orbiting Jupiter, and a cosmos far grander than anyone had imagined. His discoveries shattered centuries of doctrine, enraged the most powerful institution of his time, and forced him to stand trial for telling the truth. But Galileo was more than a scientist. He was a rebel, a visionary, and a pioneer. His relentless pursuit of knowledge laid the foundation for modern physics and astronomy, shaping the way we understand the universe today. From his early experiments with falling bodies to his battles with the Inquisition, his life was one of brilliance and defiance, of triumph and tragedy. This is his story, a story of curiosity against dogma, science against superstition, and one man's determination to move the world, even as he stood still before his accusers. And yet, it moves. Welcome to the life of Galileo Galilei. On February 15, 1564, in the thriving city of Pisa, Italy, a child was born into a world on the brink of transformation. Named Galileo Galilei, he was the eldest son of Vincenzo Galilei, a musician and music theorist, and Giulia Ammannati. The Galilei family belonged to the Florentine nobility, but struggled with financial difficulties. From an early age, Galileo was immersed in an environment that valued intellectual inquiry, music, and mathematics, an unusual combination that would later shape his scientific mind. His father, an accomplished lutenist and music theorist, often engaged in debates about the nature of sound and harmony, encouraging Galileo to question established traditions. One evening, as his father demonstrated musical intervals on the lute, he remarked, "Truth is not found in authority alone, my son, but in reason and observation." These words, though simple, planted the seeds of an empirical mindset in young Galileo. By the age of 10, Galileo moved with his family to Florence, the cultural heart of the Italian Renaissance. There he was exposed to the works of Leonardo, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and the Medici court where art and science intertwined. He was sent to the monastery school of Vallombrosa, where he received a classical education in Latin, logic, and Aristotelian philosophy. The monks noticed his sharp intellect and natural curiosity, prompting them to suggest a religious life. But Galileo's father had different plans. He envisioned his son as a physician, a prestigious and financially stable profession. At 17, Galileo enrolled at the University of Pisa, following his father's wishes to study medicine. However, the rigid medical curriculum, dominated by rote memorization rather than discovery, left him uninspired. One day, as he wandered through the grand halls of Pisa's cathedral, he observed something that would ignite his scientific passion: the rhythmic swaying of a chandelier in the dim candlelight. Curious, he timed its motion with his pulse and realized that regardless of the amplitude, the pendulum's oscillations remained constant, an insight that would later contribute to timekeeping technology. Though destined to be a physician, Galileo's heart was already drawn to the mysteries of mathematics and physics. His destiny would soon take a different course, leading him away from the conventional paths of knowledge and toward the realm of discovery. At 17, Galileo entered the University of Pisa, following his father's wishes to study medicine. Yet his true fascination lay not in anatomy, but in mathematics and physics. During his studies, he secretly attended lectures on geometry, taught by Ostilio Ricci, a court mathematician influenced by the works of Archimedes. Under Ricci's guidance, Galileo discovered that mathematics was not just an abstract discipline. It was the key to understanding the laws of nature. His passion grew, and soon he could no longer feign interest in medicine. After much resistance, His father relented, allowing him to shift his focus to mathematics and natural philosophy. Galileo quickly distinguished himself, questioning the Aristotelian principles that had dominated European thought for centuries. One of his earliest breakthroughs came through experimentation, a method rarely used at the time. According to legend, he climbed the Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropped two spheres of different weights, demonstrating that they fell at the same rate, directly contradicting Aristotle's claim that heavier objects fall faster. While there is debate over whether the experiment actually took place, Galileo's conclusions were groundbreaking. Objects in free fall accelerate uniformly, regardless of mass. In 1589, his growing reputation earned him a position as professor of mathematics at the University of Pisa. However, his outspoken criticisms of Aristotelian physics put him at odds with the academic establishment. His tenure was brief, ending in 1592. Fortunately, another opportunity awaited him: the University of Padua, a prestigious institution known for its more progressive approach to science. There, Galileo would have the freedom to develop his theories further and take his first steps toward revolutionizing physics and astronomy. In 1592, Galileo arrived at the University of Padua, where he would teach mathematics, mechanics, and astronomy for the next 18 years. Unlike the rigid conservatism of Pisa, Padua was a hub of intellectual freedom, allowing Galileo to explore new ideas without immediate censorship. His lectures attracted students from across Europe, eager to learn from the professor whose sharp mind was already challenging centuries of established doctrine. During this time, his studies in mechanics led him to one of his most significant discoveries: the law of falling bodies. To better understand motion, he designed an experiment using an inclined plane, rolling spheres down its surface. This method allowed him to observe the effects of gravity in slow motion. Through precise measurements, he formulated a revolutionary concept. The distance traveled by a falling object is proportional to the square of the time elapsed. This insight directly contradicted Aristotle's claim that objects fall at a speed proportional to their weight, further solidifying Galileo's growing reputation as a challenger of ancient wisdom. Beyond theoretical work, Galileo was a skilled inventor. He developed a military compass, which allowed gunners to calculate trajectories with greater accuracy, and an early thermoscope, a precursor to the thermometer. These innovations brought him both prestige and financial success, enabling him to support his family, including his 3 children born out of wedlock. By 1604, he turned his attention back to the heavens. That year, a new star appeared in the sky, a supernova. According to Aristotelian belief, the celestial realm was unchanging, yet this star had materialized unexpectedly. Galileo's observations confirmed that the universe was dynamic, further undermining the traditional worldview. However, it was an unexpected invention in the Netherlands that would truly change his destiny. In 1609, reports reached Galileo of a simple device that could magnify distant objects. Intrigued, he set out to improve it. His version would soon redefine humanity's understanding of the cosmos. This instrument, later known as the telescope, intrigued him. Without ever seeing the original, Galileo applied his knowledge of optics and lens grinding to build his own, significantly improving its magnification from 3 times to 20 times. What began as an exercise in engineering quickly became a scientific revolution. When Galileo pointed his telescope at the night sky, he saw a universe that no one had imagined. His meticulous observations soon shattered long-held beliefs about the cosmos. Among his groundbreaking discoveries were mountains and valleys on the moon, proving that the celestial bodies were not perfect spheres as Aristotelian philosophy claimed. 4 moons orbiting Jupiter, showing that not everything revolved around the Earth, contradicting the geocentric model. Countless stars invisible to the naked eye, revealing that the universe was far more expansive than previously believed. The phases of Venus, confirming that Venus orbited the Sun, providing crucial evidence for Copernicus's heliocentric theory. In 1610, Galileo compiled his findings into a short but explosive book, Sidereus Nuncius, the Starry Messenger. This publication electrified the scientific community and beyond, making him a celebrity across Europe. He dedicated the book to Cosimo II de' Medici, securing a prestigious position as chief mathematician and philosopher of the Grand Duke of Tuscany. Yet as news of his discoveries spread, so did resistance. Many scholars refused to look through the telescope, arguing that celestial truths should be determined by philosophy rather than observation. More dangerously, Galileo's findings threatened the Catholic Church's geocentric doctrine. Though he had gained fame, he had also made powerful enemies, and his struggle for truth had only just begun. Galileo's telescope had unveiled a new cosmos, but with discovery came danger. His heliocentric findings directly challenged the Church's traditional geocentric doctrine, which held that Earth was the fixed center of the universe. While many scholars resisted his work, Galileo found support among some high-ranking clergy who believed his discoveries could coexist with religious faith. In 1613, Galileo wrote a letter to his student Benedetto Castelli, arguing that science and scripture served different purposes, the former explaining how the universe worked, the latter teaching why. He insisted that the Bible should not be interpreted literally when discussing natural phenomena, famously stating, "The intention of the Holy Spirit is to teach us how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go." However, not all were convinced. In 1615, a group of theologians denounced heliocentrism as dangerous, claiming it contradicted the Book of Joshua, where the sun was said to stand still. That same year, Galileo traveled to Rome to defend his ideas before the Inquisition, hoping to convince the authorities with reason and evidence. His most formidable opponent was Cardinal Roberto Bellarmine, a leading figure in the Church. Bellarmine respected Galileo's intellect but warned him against promoting heliocentrism as truth rather than mere hypothesis. In 1616, the Church officially condemned Copernican theory, declaring it formally heretical. Bellarmine personally delivered Galileo a warning. He must abandon all teaching or defense of heliocentrism, or face consequences. Though shaken, Galileo remained defiant. He avoided direct confrontation, but continued gathering evidence and refining his arguments. If he could not openly teach his views, he would find a way to convince the world through persuasion and logic. For the moment, the Church had silenced him. But Galileo was not a man to be silenced forever. His greatest battle was yet to come. For years after the 1616 condemnation of heliocentrism, Galileo treaded carefully, avoiding direct conflict with the Church while continuing his research. He sought a way to present his ideas without violating the Church's decree. In 1623, an opportunity arose. Cardinal Maffeo Barberini, an admirer of Galileo's work, was elected Pope Urban VIII. Encouraged by this, Galileo believed he could once again discuss Copernican theory, as long as he framed it as a mathematical hypothesis rather than absolute truth. With this in mind, Galileo began writing his most ambitious and controversial book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems. Published in 1632, the book was structured as a conversation between three characters: Simplicio, a defender of the Aristotelian, earth-centered universe; Sagredo, an intelligent, neutral observer; Salviati, a proponent of the Copernican, sun-centered model. Although Galileo claimed neutrality, the dialogue was heavily biased in favor of heliocentrism. Worse, Simplicio, the character who defended geocentrism, was portrayed as slow-witted, using weak arguments that were easily refuted. Many believed Simplicio was meant to represent Pope Urban VIII himself, an interpretation that deeply offended the Pope. The backlash was immediate. The book, originally published with the Church's approval, was suddenly banned, and Galileo was summoned to Rome to face the Inquisition. His powerful allies quickly abandoned him, and he found himself at the mercy of his greatest adversaries. By challenging the established order, Galileo had pushed the limits of what the Church would tolerate. Now, he would be forced to answer for his defiance. The trial that awaited him would not only determine his fate, but also the fate of scientific inquiry itself. In 1633, at the age of 69, Galileo was summoned to Rome to stand trial before the Roman Inquisition. The journey, made under heavy scrutiny, was long and exhausting. Once a celebrated scholar, he now entered the Holy Office as an accused heretic, facing charges of defying the Church's 1616 order against teaching heliocentrism. The trial was politically charged. Pope Urban I, once a supporter of Galileo, now saw him as a threat to church authority. His book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, was viewed as a direct challenge to the Church's doctrine, and the Pope, believing he had been personally mocked, demanded harsh punishment. During his interrogations, Galileo was confronted with evidence from his own writings. He attempted to defend himself, claiming that the dialogue had not explicitly declared heliocentrism as fact, but merely presented arguments for and against it. However, the Inquisition was unmoved. Under threat of torture, Galileo was forced to publicly renounce his belief in the Copernican system. On June 22, 1633, dressed in penitential robes, he knelt before the Holy Tribunal and read his official recantation. With a sincere heart and unfeigned faith, I abjure, curse, and detest the said errors and heresies, and I swear that, in the future, I will never again say or assert anything which might bring similar suspicion upon me. Legend holds that upon rising, Galileo muttered the famous words, "E pur si muove," and yet it moves, a quiet defiance to his accusers. Though historically uncertain, the phrase became a symbol of resistance and the enduring power of truth. His punishment was severe: house arrest for the remainder of his life. His works were banned, and he was forbidden from further scientific discussion. However, though silenced, his ideas had already spread across Europe. The battle had been lost, but the war for scientific truth was far from over. Following his trial and forced recantation, Galileo was placed under house arrest, first in Siena and later in his villa in Arcetri, near Florence. Though confined, he remained intellectually active, continuing his research in defiance of his sentence. His spirit was unbroken, and his mind remained sharp, even as his body weakened. Despite the strict conditions imposed by the Church, Galileo received visits from students and admirers who secretly helped circulate his ideas across Europe. His most important visitor was Vincenzo Viviani, a young mathematician who became his devoted assistant. Through Viviani and other correspondence, Galileo remained engaged in the broader scientific dialogue of his time. It was during these final years that Galileo produced one of his greatest works, Discourses and Mathematical Demonstrations Concerning Two New Sciences, 1638. Smuggled out of Italy and published in Leiden, this book laid the foundation for modern physics, addressing the laws of motion, strength of materials, and the principles of inertia, concepts that would later influence Isaac Newton's work on gravity. However, Galileo's health deteriorated rapidly. By 1638, he was completely blind, possibly due to cataracts and glaucoma. Though unable to observe the heavens, he continued dictating his thoughts to his students. In his last years, he reflected on the long battle he had fought, knowing that his scientific legacy would outlive the censorship and persecution he had endured. On January 8, 1642, at the age of 77, Galileo passed away in his home in Arcetri. The Church denied him a public funeral, fearing that his grave would become a site of pilgrimage for free thinkers. Yet, even in death, his ideas could not be buried. His influence on science was irreversible, and the revolution he had begun would shape the future of human knowledge. Though Galileo died in 1642, his ideas continued to spread, influencing a new generation of scientists. Among them was Isaac Newton, who built upon Galileo's principles of motion and inertia to formulate the laws of universal gravitation. The scientific revolution that Galileo had helped ignite could no longer be suppressed. For over a century, the Catholic Church maintained its condemnation of Galileo's work. His dialogue remained on the index of forbidden books, and heliocentrism was still considered heretical doctrine. However, as evidence in favor of Copernican theory became overwhelming, the Church's stance gradually shifted. In 1737, nearly a century after his death, Galileo's remains were transferred to a grander tomb in the Basilica of Santa Croce in Florence, an honor denied to him during his lifetime. This was a symbolic recognition of his contributions to knowledge, though his condemnation had not yet been lifted. Over the following centuries, scholars and theologians re-evaluated Galileo's trial, acknowledging the errors made in suppressing his work. The final act of reconciliation came in 1992, when Pope John Paul II formally admitted the Church's mistake in condemning Galileo. After a long investigation, the Vatican declared that Galileo had been unjustly persecuted and recognized his profound contributions to science. This re-examination marked the end of an era of conflict between faith and scientific inquiry. Galileo, once condemned as a heretic, was finally acknowledged as one of history's greatest minds, a man whose pursuit of truth had forever changed our understanding of the universe. Galileo Galilei's legacy extends far beyond his lifetime, shaping modern science, philosophy, and culture. His pioneering work in astronomy, physics, and the scientific method laid the foundation for centuries of discovery, earning him the title Father of Modern Science. His contributions to astronomy forever changed our understanding of the cosmos. His discovery of Jupiter's moons, the phases of Venus, and the irregular surface of the moon provided direct evidence that the universe was far more complex than previously believed. His improvements to the telescope ushered in a new era of observational astronomy, paving the way for figures like Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton, and Edwin Hubble. In physics, Galileo's studies of motion and inertia formed the basis for Newton's laws of motion. His experiments with falling objects and inclined planes shattered the Aristotelian notion that heavier objects fall faster and introduced the idea that all bodies accelerate uniformly under gravity. These principles remain fundamental to modern mechanics and engineering. Beyond his specific discoveries, Galileo revolutionized the way science was conducted. He championed the empirical method, insisting that knowledge should be based on observation, experimentation, and mathematical reasoning, rather than blind adherence to authority. His approach set the precedent for the scientific revolution, influencing thinkers from René Descartes to Albert Einstein. Galileo's story has also been immortalized in literature, art, and popular culture. His struggles against dogma have been dramatized in plays such as Bertolt Brecht's Life of Galileo, while his defiant stance in the face of persecution continues to symbolize intellectual courage and the pursuit of truth. The phrase "et pour si muove," and yet it moves, whether spoken by Galileo or not, remains a powerful testament to the resilience of scientific truth. Today, Galileo's name is honored in space exploration with NASA's Galileo spacecraft, 1989-2003, venturing to Jupiter, the very planet whose moons he first observed in 1610. His influence endures in astronomy, physics, and philosophy, ensuring that his quest for knowledge remains an inspiration for future generations. More than 4 centuries after his death, Galileo's legacy stands as a testament to the power of curiosity, reason, and the relentless pursuit of truth.